Hi, welcome to Eliot Pepper's Inner Circle, where I get to interview friends, founders, and venture investors. Today, I'm really lucky to have Matt Cartagena with me. Matt is the VP of Marketing at a UK-based startup called FineUp, and he's also the co-author of Accelerate, which is a new book that just came out last month that sort of shares all the inside secrets of the world's top startup accelerator programs like YCombinator and Techstars. So I'm really excited to have Matt with us today and to be able to tap his brain about how to start a startup and what accelerators can do to improve that process. So welcome, Matt, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, Elliot, thanks for having me. Like I said before, sorry, Luke, who's the co-author, lead author, really couldn't make it today. I'll try my best to fill in any insights you would have offered. Yeah, so I'm here based in New Jersey in America, whereas Luke's in England. I was involved in corporate, I'd say about 3 years back before this book even started, and then I made the decision to leave corporate and pursue more entrepreneurial projects and goals that I had, and that's when I got involved in this book, as well as FineUp, which is the startup I've worked for since then. And meanwhile, I was also pursuing my MBA. So doing the MBA while working on this book has been quite an endeavor, to say the least. And the book actually started as a blog, which I'm not sure how many books out there have started as a blog, but howtowriteabusinessplan.com is where we're hosting lots of interviews with entrepreneurs to really get insights on, as the name kind of leaves the impression of, to get insight on what founders that came from top accelerators thought about writing a business plan and how to pursue starting a company. And eventually it turned into this huge resource for accelerator programs, or people pursuing an accelerator program and wanting to be part of one of these. So we decided to turn it into a book. We launched a Kickstarter campaign, funded the book, self-published it, and eventually got picked up by Apache Press, who's our publisher now, to become really the first comprehensive guide to accelerator programs.
Okay, so maybe we can start at the very beginning, and that is, what is an accelerator program? What is it for? What are founders trying to get out of it? How does it differ from incubation programs or anything else that's out there? Like, why would someone go to an accelerator, and what are they hoping to achieve?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I find myself explaining to people who aren't familiar with accelerator programs, starting with incubators. It seems a lot more people are familiar with what incubators are, and for good reason, because incubators have been along for a lot longer. So one way to think about it is accelerators are evolved from incubators, and I like to think of them as sort of cousins or distant cousins, right? An analogy that we use in the book Accelerate is incubators can sort of be thought of as startup gyms, right? You go there, it's got the resources you need, the equipment, it's got the environment you need to grow your startup. Whereas accelerators are more so, you can think of those as startup boot camps, right? With a more defined protocol, defined mission, more defined end date, and you really force focus in these a lot more. So incubators tend to have not really a defined end date, and if it is, it's a lot longer. And kind of like the name suggests, accelerators are really designed to accelerate whether you're going to become a success or fail in some sort of sense, and then iterate. Right.
So both are programs that startup founders would apply to and get into, but incubators are basically a place where you can go and do your work, and accelerators are a program where you get coaching and the sort of time defined and Is that a correct understanding?
Correct. And accelerators, it's great for startups that you know it it's typically a 3 month, maybe a little bit depends on the accelerator. Accelerators are typically a 3 month program. You go in with a team, and also maybe 6 other teams are accepted. There's seed capital involved, heavy mentorship from the community, and a chance to pitch on demo day and get extra fundraising. So it's really like you get a design structure that's more made for the entrepreneur who knows what they want at the end of the program. Whereas an incubator it's not as structured, you know.
Okay. So, I think that, one question that I sometimes get when founders are considering accelerator programs is it worth it to do it at all, right? Like, is this going to be something that advances the ball for your business dramatically, or is it something that is a waste of time when you could be closing new customers or iterating your product or whatever else is core to your business model at the moment? So you've talked to over 100 founders, right, who have gone through these programs. What's your take? Are accelerators worth it? Like, if you're starting a new company, is it a distraction, or is it really going to give you a boost of rocket fuel?
Yeah, I think this really depends on the company and the startup involved, and it's really up to the founders potentially applying to a program to discern between whether it's right for them or it's not. And I think it comes down to the stage that this startup is at, right? I think accelerators are excellent, even incubators. Accelerators are excellent for startups that are really trying to get off the ground, know they need to accelerate their company, know they need to make the right connections, gain outlets towards their customers, and whereas a company that's maybe in a later stage, getting funding isn't the most difficult thing for them. They have a network, they have a community that's willing to help them. Maybe it's not right for them, right? They can already get what they need to get. So overall, I think from the book, all the insight we've gotten, it's tremendously useful for startups looking to quote unquote accelerate their company and get from point A to point B. But if you've already gotten from point A to point B, then maybe not necessarily, right? You're probably, if the marginal value isn't there for you, you're probably better off either looking at an accelerator that's more designed for a second stage, right? Or continuing the success that you've already kind of proven out.
Okay, so why don't we take that a level deeper? What should founders expect to get out of it, right? So, like, what are the high line items that the best that good founders get out of the best accelerator programs?
Yeah, I think
you mentioned mentorship. Like, what else are you going to come out with that you didn't come in with?
Yeah, I think beyond just what the program is structured with, like the mentoring and the seed funding and things like that. Obviously, the mentoring and the network has been, it seems like, incredibly useful for them, because these are things that are typically out of reach for startups that are early on, right? So if you're a company that's you know you're in retail, or let's say you're a company that deals with payment services, right? And you get to have meetings with mentors who were involved in PayPal in the early stages, or a co-founder of PayPal. That's something that's incomparable, right? And it depends on which accelerator you're in. Some accelerators are designed for certain industries, but other than that, I think from the insight that the founders have given us, it seems like one of the biggest things that they come out with is validating it, very much like the lean startup methodology and the lean startup principles, learning which assumptions would be incredibly, if they went wrong, which assumptions would have potentially damaged their progress, right? And learning that very, very early on. as opposed to later in the company and deferring that. I think that's one of them, as well as just being surrounded by a community that's made for potentially making your company succeed.
Great. No, that's very helpful. So this is sort of interesting because you've now spent quite a bit of time writing this book, probably quite a bit of time doing all the interviews that also informed the blog before the book. And you said you're currently finishing up your MBA. Well, Paul Graham, the founder of YCombinator, has made some pretty famous comments about comparing accelerators to MBA programs and maybe questioning the value of MBA programs for entrepreneurs when you compare them to YCombinator or some of the other accelerators. So what's your take? You're in the middle of your MBA. You know probably more than anybody else about these startup accelerator programs. Are they going to replace the MBA for people who want to start companies instead of working at the Fortune 500?
Yeah, we've actually I've been pretty interested in that question myself. You can imagine why. For the record, I've finished my MBA. I'm out of there. And yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And in my personal opinion, I'll start with that. I think it's going that way to some degree, right? I think the nature of like MBAs, it used to be a spot where entrepreneurs would apply to. This was one of the sure shot ways of potentially becoming a successful entrepreneur, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And we actually had an excellent discussion with Matt Ellis of Cloudability as well as Raj from Localytics, two CEOs from very successful companies, both Techstar graduates, to get their perspective on that. So Raj, CEO of Localytics, he's got an MBA and also a very successful entrepreneur. Matt Ellis never even went to college, and I think he started his first company when he was something like 15 or 16 out in England. And something they pointed to was that at the time MBAs were very much when they came around, they weren't really looked at as something that was trusted for an entrepreneurial education. Right? It was something a little bit different. Over time, they became programs that very much mainstream, trusted, and like I said, at one point were entrepreneurs sure bet for starting a company, acquiring a network, and potentially fundraising. Now it seems that accelerators are just by design a little bit better or a lot better for entrepreneurs. They're not theoretical, they're very practical. Accelerators have stakeholders that have skin in the game, and it's very fast, right? Whereas MBA is typically up to 2 years of invested time, and you're not really exactly going to walk out with much in terms of a startup, unless you're joining some sort of incubator within the program there. So, in my opinion, I think it is. Maybe not. Maybe not to the degree that MBAs are as well known. I think there's still some time for that, but the direction that it's headed is pretty interesting.
Okay, so maybe potential founders out there should reconsider their MBA plans.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's what a lot of these graduates are saying as well.
Sure. So similar to the sort of like top tier MBA programs, the top tier accelerators are extremely competitive to get into. So, if we have founders out there who are looking to get accepted into a program like Techstars or a program like YCombinator, or some of the most well-known and therefore most competitive programs, how can they maximize their chances of getting accepted, right? Because I think that's sort of a question that's always on everyone's mind.
Yeah, sure shot way to get in, right?
Yeah, right. What's the secret sauce? Like,
yeah, I don't know if there's any sure shot way. It is extremely competitive. I think if you look at the numbers, the acceptance rate for something like Techstars or Y Combinator is a lot smaller than something like Harvard, right? So it's an excellent question, especially as the accelerator landscape grows. I think it really boils down to a couple key things, and they're not hacks, they're not really shortcuts, and it comes down to um, progress and traction, right? I think the best thing to enter into an accelerator program is to enter in with evidence that you're going to be successful, right? Because you're going in and the stakeholders involved, potentially at the end of the program, investing in you, and they want to make sure that you're the right company to let into the program. So going in with traction, we included a quote from Dave McClure in the book, something like most people think a pitch is a good novel, right? Whereas it's really a good what's the word? Punchline. So knock knock, who's there? Traction. So you want to enter in with that, as well as just a fantastic team, right? And a team that is absolutely going to get it done with a proven track record. And those two things combined, it's 80% of the journey to get accepted, I think, as well as making sure you've got an accelerator to startup fit, right? If you're a company that's dealing with dealing in an industry that this accelerator really doesn't have a history or doesn't focus on too much, then your chances are already kind of dwindled down, right? Whereas if you can find an accelerator that's specifically designed to cater to startups, whether it's in the healthcare industry that you're involved in or the retail, then it's that much better as well.
Makes sense. So if those are not tricks, but the right things to focus on if you want to get it in the right way, what are the biggest mistakes that you've seen founders make vis-a-vis accelerator programs? Whether it's in terms of getting accepted or whether it's when they're in the program and maybe not leveraging it as much as they could be, or whether it's as an alumni.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to tell because it really varies. I don't think there's any one thing that founders typically stumble over. But something that definitely comes to mind, we have heard quite a bit, is it's kind of hard to imagine what you're going to experience with one of these programs. These programs are intense. They're designed that way. Something like Techstars or Y Combinator, 3 months or so. Imagine the things you have to accomplish in 3 months to prove, to validate something and get customers and grow a company. So I think just preparation for that experience, doing your diligence and trying to meet with as many graduates who have gone through the program that are similar to your company as possible, to get insight into what you need to be prepared for, to really best leverage the program experience, because there's no, like, from interviews with some managing directors, Techstars, it's going to be chaotic regardless. And preparing yourself to sort of remain calm and find structure within chaos, I think, is important. So going in with a strong head and preparation, I would say, is one thing to make sure you do.
Makes sense. So you are on the management team of a startup yourself, FineUp. Did FineUp go through an accelerator program?
Yeah, so FineUp very early on, applied to an accelerator. And this was before I was actually involved in the company. So Luke is probably best to speak about it. Unfortunately, he's not here. But it was, at that point, it was too early. It was too much in its infancy to be accepted. It did make it to the second or third round of applications. Through this process, they were actually in the process of pivoting and even changed in the name from what it was called Entrepreneur Finder to FineUp. And then quite a bit after that, they also applied to Entrepreneur Roundtable, and they made it to the second round. And at that point, they still weren't where they needed to be. in terms of progress and traction, and didn't quite make it. So as far as the full accelerator experience, FineUp hasn't been through. No.
Got it. And why not?
It's a good question. I mean, it's not. It's. I think it's obviously not the easiest thing to get into one of these programs, but after that point, I think it's been Luke's decision to forego that at the moment. We're a very lean team, and being out in England, there's definitely a lot of other nuances and details involved in coming out to the U.S. Where we'd ultimately want to be for a program. So it's on the radar, but it's not quite something we're doing right now.
Okay, so maybe sometime in the future.
Yeah.
So you guys are both entrepreneurs and you're both authors, and I love to think about like this. A lot of the conversations I have on for my inner circle program are about startups and about books. So I'm also interested in the crossover there, right? You're authors and you're entrepreneurs. Have you noticed any crossovers in those two roles?
Yeah, I think for us, our experience as authors has been, I'd say, a little bit unconventional, right? The route that we took, starting as launching as a Kickstarter project and self-publishing, it was, there was a lot of unknowns. There's enough unknowns as an author as it is, and that itself was to us an entrepreneurial project. But outside of that, I think just the experience of talking to 150 entrepreneurs about their journey, what worked, what didn't, their challenges, and if there was crossover just baked into the whole experience, right?
So how did you run that successful Kickstarter project? Because that's something, many companies are launching products by leveraging Kickstarter now, and you launched your book by leveraging it. So what do you think were the critical elements that drove your success there, and did you find it useful? Like, what were the big takeaways?
Yeah, we threw a lot on the wall and we saw it stuck, right? And in some ways that's maybe entrepreneurial, depending on what type you're dealing with. But it's funny because, like I mentioned before, Luke, the lead author, is out in England. I'm here in the U.S. So that whole project was really interesting in retrospect. So during the project, we had our heads down and we were in different countries collaborating virtually and trying to get stuff done. The Kickstarter project itself, I'd say, we went in, we had the idea, we went from idea to execution quite quickly. So what worked for us really was, it's easy to say in retrospect, but Twitter was absolutely a champion for us. The whole startup community is very involved in Twitter. We were able to find people that would potentially be interested in accelerator programs, right? On Twitter, we were able to target some of the stakeholders in different accelerator programs through Twitter and find them and sort of get them interested in the book. Outside of that, making sure that we had a pledge tier for the appropriate or for the right people, right? So we wanted to make sure that not just people who potentially would be applying to accelerator programs would want to buy the book, but also people who ran these accelerator programs to have an option for them. So pledging, structuring that out appropriately was important for us. And we had tremendous support from a sponsor for the book as well. We had a pledge option for that. And that was incredibly useful for us, because without that, Accelerate wouldn't exist without that sponsor option. So these were sort of our heavy hitter options on Kickstarter, and yeah, it was I'd boil it down to those. I'd boil it down to those because through that, there's a lot of serendipity involved in the success of our Kickstarter campaign and stuff we couldn't have planned for. We had rough ideas of where we should target um, entrepreneurs and startup founders, but at the end of the day, you know, getting our message out to them however possible was really what worked. And the reason I say Twitter is because at one point we were messaging. I had messaged everybody I would think would be interested in Techstars founders and Techstars stories with accelerator programs. And at one point messaged Brad Feld, who then I see about a couple hours later he ended up backing the Kickstarter project. So we said, oh, that's nice. Why don't we why don't we speak to Brad and see if this see if he'd be interested in writing the forward for the book. And long story short, he ended up writing the forward for our book. And then the publishing company that he launched out, FG Press, we ended up going under them and being where we're at now. So things like that, it's just taking it as far as it can, leveraging the spontaneity of it all.
So why don't we take a moment there? So both of us have been published by FG Press, and I don't know if this has happened to you yet, but I've actually had many authors approach me over email or through social media or in person, asking about my experience with them because, obviously they have quite a different model than the big five traditional publishers do. So why don't we help those authors short-circuit that conversation with you? So what has your experience been with FG Press? Like if an author was to come up to you today and ask you that question, what can you share? Because it's obviously, it's a startup too, right?
Yeah. So I break it into a couple parts. The help with the book, right? So the help with the book in designing and editing and things like that has been absolutely awesome. And I think for authors who are considering publishers, one thing that FG Press is particularly poised to do and something they're really trying to continue positioning themselves for, is it's great for authors creating something entrepreneurial. Right, between Brad Feld's connections and their positioning in the startup community, it's a good position to be in, right in the middle of that community. FG Press, I think, is continuing to establish their name as such, and for us, it was a good match. It was a very good match, right? Because Techstars is one of the very early successful accelerator programs, and there couldn't have been really much of a better fit in terms of reputation, and I'd say definitely look into what you're trying to publish, a match with what FG Press is really going down towards. You can see it like your book. And the other books published, very entrepreneurial focused. And if it's far from that, I'd reconsider maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what have been as an author, what have been the most interesting books you've read recently?
Oh, well, I've been on a tear with a lot of, I guess you'd say, Zen-focused books. From the Inner Game of Tennis, I'm actually looking at it right now. Inner Game of Tennis, Phil Jackson's 11 Rings, The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. So these types of books that deal with optimal performance and in sort of mastering one's expertise or trade or sport. Other than that, I do have your lovely book right here. Funny enough.
Oh, nice. I'm glad it arrived.
Yeah, just started to tear into that. It looks like a lovely read, and also still rereading and rereading my book when I can.
I bet. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I bet. All
Yeah.
right. Well, Matt, thanks so much for making the time to be here with us this morning. I really appreciate it, and I think that for everybody out there, Accelerate is really cool. After reading it, I felt like I did have an inside look into YCombinator and Techstars and all the other top programs. So I think, especially for founders considering those programs, I don't know if there's any better read out there. I mean, it's pretty much the comprehensive guide to looking at those. That's really useful and really cool, and I really appreciate your time to join us today.
Yeah, Elliot, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, have a good one. Bye
All
bye.
right.